Good evening. It is another lovely fall evening. Everyone's getting ready for the big celebration, all the turkey. And for those that are not having turkey, they're getting ready for something alternative. For me, it would be turkey. I'm not doing any turkey, but I'm on a keto. I do a keto lifestyle. It's not a keto diet. It's a keto lifestyle. So that's it includes turkey. You can have turkey. I would say you'd have to make your gravy. I haven't done any kind of a big dinner on keto, so I just know that I really like mashed potatoes. So it just feels like you need to have those. You really need to have the mashed potatoes. So that would be my, that would be the biggest thing that I would miss, I would think. But anyway, let's see what we've got up tonight. Yes, the chemtrails. I thought I would focus a little bit on the chemtrails tonight. I was doing some research. Believe it or not, I do research every day. I find this really fascinating because it's not just about the fires. It's about all the different ideas that people have, all the different concepts that people have about what's going on in California. And of course, I was listening to George Webb today, and he was talking about the idea that the fires have something to do with, hiding evidence. And he just alluded to it. What I like about George is that he doesn't get into theories. He often has people talking to him about things behind the scenes. And so far be it from me to ever suggest that George does not have something that he is keeping close to the vest, and that he knows that I don't know. And I looked at that and I thought, that's definitely a possibility, because it wouldn't surprise me at all the way things that are heating up in terms of so we've got the midterms over. Now we've got little Adam Schiff, who's or variations thereof, who's quaking in his boots, I'm sure. Now, for those of you that are here for the wildfires and may not know anything about George Webb or any of the other things that are going on behind the scenes, just recognize that there are things that we are not aware of that are happening. And for those that are following Q, they think nothing's happening and it's all just going to fade away. But I would say that as soon as you see people projecting, now we've got Ivanka and her email messages that we're targeting in on. Well, that's clearly a way of distracting from Hillary's emails, because I believe that she's she's definitely being called up in the carpet because she's got to answer some questions, and she's got to do that, I think, within about 3 weeks. And so there is a lot of distraction going on, and nothing would surprise me in terms of what these guys are capable of. And if nothing else, we have these pictures that you're seeing here, and I've just kind of got on a loop, and I found just a compilation of images just showing the chemtrails, showing the emissions. But I find this one in particular quite interesting, just this grid pattern. There's just no question that this is not, these are not flight paths going back and forth, and that this chaff is hanging in the air. So take a look at this one. It's pretty amazing. And the other thing that you can notice, and you can see a little bit of it there, you can actually see like a chembo, as they call it. It's kind of a rainbow that's created. If you see oil on the ground and it mixes with water, you end up seeing kind of a little rainbow there. And it happens when oil mixes in with water. And so this is happening quite a bit as you look up in the sky and you see this kind of ring around the sun, anywhere that's illuminated, but it also can be seen right in the actual chemicals that they're spraying, because there's an oil base to them, which is why they hang in the air. And this is your aluminum, strontium, barium, all the wonderful things that they're spraying. And if you take a look at satellite images, I'm going to actually bring up some satellite images. I'm going to go and take a look at them and see how they intersect, just for the months before the fires were starting. So this is how you create a climate. When you're spraying things in the air, you're bound to create a new set of circumstances when it comes to the just the atmosphere in general. Obviously, I mean, it makes sense. It was interesting. A few years ago, they were saying, "Oh, we found this new oil patch in the Arctic Ocean. I think it was in the Bering Sea." And Obama was all excited, and he was telling everybody about how they had, it was obviously global warming, and the ice caps had melted, and they found this new oil patch, and they already had all the paperwork in order to be able to go ahead and start drilling within days of this announcement. And they literally supposedly just found this oil patch. I found that very odd. Just the idea that there was such glee. Oh yeah, well we're really concerned about the global warming. However, if there has to be global warming, then the fact that we can actually go up there and take out oil is great. It's excellent. So that was a little bit of a tip off, actually. So one of the things I wanted to take a look at. So we're taking a look at the sky, and how the sky is being filled with all of these amazing things. And so what I wanted to do is to show you an image here of a smart meter. And this is a file photo. This was part of the forensic. There's so many of these. I could actually show you many pictures of smart meters and the fires that they create. But this is just an example, and it says it's probably been seen by very few members of the public prior to the posting of this article by Sky Vision Solutions, and that wouldn't surprise me, although there's many more now. A lot of these fires were happening shortly after the smart meters were put in, and so there was a mandate that they be installed by the 31st of December 2012 all around the world. Weird. And shortly after that, they were finding that there were these spontaneous fires that were taking place. And I mentioned on a previous show that in Saskatchewan, in Canada, the Hydro Authority there had so many complaints, and there was so much evidence that the smart meters were causing these fires that they actually took them out across the province. Very few people hear about this. Sort of like vaccinations, think what you will about vaccinations, but there are certain people that are being affected because there's a vaccination court and people are being awarded money. So regardless of how few people there are, the fact that they couldn't opt out is the issue, and the fact that people couldn't opt out of smart meters is the issue here. And so to go back and say, okay, yeah, actually, the smart meters are spontaneously combusting was a big deal. It's like saying that vaccinations are causing harm. In the case of vaccinations, it's a no-fault court situation, so the drug companies can never be held responsible, and in fact, the taxpayer has to pay for their legal fees. A little known fact. I did not know that till I found it out. And so think what you will, again, about these things. At least be informed. And that's what I'm trying to do here on Character Driven. It's what Dr. Judy Wood and I have been doing over the years. And when she comes on the show, we discuss exactly this kind of thing. Again, I'm not speaking for her. I speak completely for myself. But I just want to take a look at some of the just the ideas of what might be happening here. I wanted to take a look at this image again. We were looking at it the other day. This is from Paradise Lost. I'm sure a lot of people have used that turn of phrase, but it really is very, very sad. So many people talk about the fact that there are trees standing and that the damage to the buildings is so massive. So what I thought I would do is I took a look at some of the information from years gone by, and also I wanted to take a look at the idea of sunspots and cell towers. There was an article written by James Grundvig, actually, it's weird, it was this time last year, November 21st, 2017, and we're going to take a look at that. But I just wanted to remind us of what these cars look like. And again, people are talking about directed energy weapons. I think sometimes what happens is that people have different ideas. Their ideas about what directed energy is can be confusing. It's not everybody knows about how energy works in the first place, let alone how directed energy works. But if we're talking about the idea of the directed energy that was used to dustify the buildings on 9/11 and to toast the cars and to create the Cheeto fires, that particular kind of energy can be proven not to be the case in this fire. Because if we take a look at these cars, even just looking very simply, we don't have to do a lot of digging. We can see that these cars were, they're burned out, they're hollowed out. You can see the scorch marks. You can see, what I notice mostly is that the trunks are closed and the doors are closed. And what was actually happening to the, let me just take a look at this. I'm going to show, here's another one actually. This is a good one. It actually helps to see things a little bit closer up. You can see the tires. They're sort of they're a bit of a puddle. Like they're actually gone, but there's evidence of where the material has gone in that it has melted and it's sort of become part of the sidewalk. And you can see the scorch marks, and you can see the paint that has come off of the the cars themselves. So again, we're just going to take a look at this this vehicle here and just kind of get used to this. It's kind of like practicing music. You just go over it again and again, and you start to really see it. And one of the advantages I've had, I really see it as a huge advantage, is the fact that I've had Dr. Wood explaining, going over the slide presentation as she is here at the Breakthrough Energy Conference in 2012. We started that same year doing a show called the PSYOP Recovery Program. We were actually doing it on live stream. And unfortunately, I had a free account, and the free account has gone bye-bye. So I did download some of those, but some of them have disappeared. But it was a really interesting show because we would have somebody on live in the room with us, and so they would sign on and be there in real time, and they hadn't actually seen the presentation. And we had people that were engineers, we had people that were iron workers, metal workers, welders, Hollywood actors. We had a variety of different people, but the people I found the most interesting were the ones that already had theories about what had happened, and a lot of it was to do with the explosions and a lot of kinetic energy involved. And so this was one of the images that people found really confusing when they were just thinking in terms of the buildings and not in terms of what was happening around the buildings. So if we think in terms of the fires in California, we can think, we can take a look at some of the surrounding circumstances, and we can go, yeah, well, that car was sitting in the driveway, or it was sitting on the street. And, cars have gasoline in them and they're flammable. So it makes perfect sense that they would have been affected by the fires. They would have burned. So this image just helps us to get kind of a baseline with what was happening on 9/11, and it even shows how much weirder it is than what people thought it was, because these vehicles that you see in this picture are they're on a bridge that is a mile away from the World Trade Center, and it was shortly after the destruction took place, and then these vehicles were actually towed quite quickly. So whoever got these pictures did us a great service, because they, they didn't want people to notice what had happened, but also, I really don't think that whoever was involved in this kind of destruction knew what was going to happen. I think they had a rough idea, but I think they had no idea what the technology was going to do. And the fact that these vehicles were, so far away, a mile away, you can't explain that. You can't just say, well, they were hit by, burning debris. They were, there's no possible explanation for why these vehicles were affected in this way. So they had to get rid of them as quickly as possible. So apparently there were these flatbed tow trucks, and I think there are actually pictures of them in her presentation. I can't remember that right now. You'd think I'd have memorized every slide, but she may have just mentioned it. But people were noticing that right away. They were taken, and not only that, but they were flattened. Well, who does that to evidence? Who does that when you're having a situation where you want to be able to go back and take a look at things forensically? I mean, this is a pretty weird phenomenon. Wouldn't we want to look at it? Again, we've seen this image before. I never get tired of this, by the way. Other people may, but I find it, the investigation. That's part of why I got into journalism, because I was really interested in doing investigation, and so few people have the patience for it. It's surprising to me. They just don't seem to be interested in doing the investigation. The part that involves having to sort of suspend our ideas, suspend our disbelief, suspend everything, and just allow the evidence to speak to us. And I think that's why Dr. Wood and I have gotten along, because I just find it amazing that on this and every other subject that we've ever talked about, she's really able to have a different perspective, because she doesn't just jump in. She looks very carefully at the situation overall. She also, if everyone's going down one road, she's very much about standing and allowing them to pass, and just go ahead, do your thing. I'm just going to be here looking at the evidence, and I'm going to be using my skills in a more productive way. So again, there's this wax spot, there's the lights. These are all important things, because fire will tend to, wax actually attracts the fire, but it also means that it was unaffected, in the sense that, sorry, I'm in a flight path here. Sometimes you hear a plane. Even though I'm very, very remote, I'm here in the Airstream Studio. Some people may not know about the Airstream project, but I have a 1969. It's a vintage Airstream. And throughout all of the things I've gone through in the past number of years, I've had this as my constant. And it houses my, I've got all my equipment in here, and I do my radio show in here. I do my YouTube video here, which is kind of interesting, because when I first started doing these, when I started my channel, I guess maybe it was 2009. I really wasn't doing live streams at that time. I started when we were doing PSYOP recovery program, but I've moved, physically moved houses several times, and some people know my partner died and various things have happened. But the thing that was interesting at that time was that when I got the Airstream, I said, well, at least, if I have to move, and I didn't know I was going to have to be moving at that time 10 years ago, but I thought, at least if I have to move, I will have my studio. And it was kind of a joke. And I'm just finding it amazing, because, if I can actually take the Airstream on location to festivals and that sort of thing. So I do, I stream music as well. I stream events. but just to be able to, if any of you are cooks and you work in kitchens, your own kitchen or anybody else's kitchen, or your job involves having a lot of equipment, you'll know what I mean when you're able to sit down in a seat and to be able to find everything that you need and to get oriented. And really, the biggest thing that's changed for me is the technology itself, because I'm a filmmaker, and I've done lots and lots of workshops with kids, and they sort of, they actually usually are taking me along a path too, but I often will show them equipment from even 5 years ago, and they'll go, wow, that's weird. But I love to be able to carry on using that equipment. That was a rabbit trail, but I wanted people to know that I am in a fairly unconventional situation. I'm in the middle of nowhere, really. I have an internet connection. I have power. And so I really, I love the fact that we can do this, that we can communicate in these kinds of ways, and that it's so accessible. I used to do television when I was a teenager, and it was such a big deal. Everything was so difficult. The cameras were big and lunky, and there was a crew that would follow me if I was doing something on location, which I loved to do. But it took a lot of cable and a lot of wires in general, and these great big pieces of machinery that you'd have to sling over your shoulder. Fortunately, at that time, I wasn't doing that. I was doing I was in front of the camera, which isn't my favorite, but I didn't have to do all the schlepping. But anyway, again, I think that's what really attracts me to this whole thing with being able to feature people like Dr. Judy Wood, and to get to know people on this kind of level, because you really do gain a respect for their knowledge and their understanding of how things work. How it's just amazing to me that there are people around the world that have these skills that I certainly don't possess, and then I have the skills to be able to bring them to a larger audience, and so that's a very cool thing. So I'm just going to remind us too about this is all going to come together as we take a look at all these different elements, and we've kind of been building on different concepts. So we have this natural phenomenon here, and because you can see that these are trees. There's no there are no smart meters here. There could have been chemtrails. We don't know. Obviously, this is a pretty arid place. This is from Australia, and these photographs were taken about 10 years ago. And I just find this one absolutely amazing, because you can just see how it's like the burning bush in the Bible. You can just see, it's almost like God's hands come down and just targeted that bush. And so you can call this directed energy. So far we've seen a smart meter that has gone kaput, and that would be directed energy. We've seen the vehicles, 2 versions. We've seen what happens when fire is directed toward a vehicle, and say it has a lot of combustible things in it. And I'm going to say that gasoline would be amongst the most combustible, but once it gets going, it's got all sorts of other things like plastic and rubber and paint and all sorts of different things that get consumed. Okay, so there's consumables. The combustibles create the fire, and then the consumables are what actually get eaten up by the fire. And so in this case, we've got sort of the opposite situation with no wires, no smart meters, nothing. And we can see that, it looks like it was like a sunny day, and all of a sudden this firestorm kind of developed because of the particular weather conditions. So another thing that we're going to take a look at is the fact that there were sunspots as well, and at various times last year in particular. So we're going to take a look at that. Let's take a look first too with the we were taking a look at another neighborhood, because this is a neighborhood that it doesn't have a lot of trees to begin with, but we can actually see a lot of scorching, and I'm going to say a lot of that could be trees, it could be lawns. There's something where the scorching is that creates more a more incendiary effect, and you can actually see that down on the street there. It kind of looks like the trees have been almost implanted onto the street, like or fused, kind of like the shadow of the trees. But I'm wondering if that isn't some sort of a liquid that has that got away from a vehicle, or there's all sorts of things that could be, and I don't know what it is. But all I'm doing is looking, I'm observing, and I'm seeing a lot of things in this picture that you can't see when you're in a neighborhood with a lot of trees. So we get a chance to see some of the cars, some of the vehicles. That one that looks like it might be, it's either a trailer or a van or something. It's a white object just over a little bit to the right, and it doesn't seem to be affected. And yet there's other cars that were totally consumed. So this way we're able to focus in on the cars rather than on the vegetation. So we kind of looked at a lot of different scenarios. And then this one's interesting too, because it's got a lot of trees. It's very lush still, but all the houses, well, not all the houses are gone, but a lot of the houses are gone completely. This one doesn't have as many cars. It's got that one car that I can see on the left there. Doesn't seem to have been affected. But what I find odd is, like, you can see the trees are singed, but the lawns are pretty much intact. And some of the smaller bushes have been affected, but in no way does that resemble the one that we just looked at. So it makes me wonder if these bigger trees, the more mature trees, are kind of a fire guard, that they're keeping the wind down, possibly. That there's a way in which the fire doesn't turn into a firenado, which is what we were taking a look at before. Again, I just find this image, I just want to go back to it again to remind us of how fire consumes things. It finds something that is combustible and it consumes it in the same way that lightning finds a lightning rod or something that is electrical, and goes right through the lines. It goes right through the electrical lines, which is why people turn off their electricity in a storm, because it's basically electricity. And a lot of these things, like, it's amazing. That is energy right there. That is nature's energy. And, here we are trying to create free energy, and there it is, folks. But we don't necessarily want that kind. And again, for those that didn't see the rocket stove, you take a look on the internet. Go and take a look at the rocket stove. I lit mine today again. I have a really badly designed rocket stove. You can't even really call it that, but I've been experimenting with it just out of interest, because I live in a pretty rainy area, and so I don't have to worry about things catching on fire, even though I'm in the woods. And so it's sort of the opposite, trying to get things going. And so I save up my paper and I burn it. But just the way that a rocket stove is built, it creates this kind of, it feeds the fire from the bottom. And so when these winds come up, they feed the fire, but then what happens is the fire creates its own wind. And I find that just absolutely amazing. Okay, so I have an interesting little video here, and hopefully it will play nice for us. And I have no doubt that it's all going to work just dandily. Is that a good word? I think so. Okay, so this is a really interesting experiment done by a bunch of goofballs, and maybe I will put the sound on so that you can hear it. Let me just see if I can get the sound to work. But so basically, what's happening in the video that I'm going to show you is that these folks are, I don't know if it's a place where they work or if it's just something that they're doing and they happen to have a yard where they can do this, but they decided that they would put some metal into a microwave and see what happens. And I find this really interesting because this is another form of directed energy.
Is it even doing anything?
Yeah, I think
Oh, there it goes. See, more metal shipping. Hey, the plastic's on fire.
So, yeah, so we've got there's metal in there. I'm seeing what's going on.
I just feel like it's gonna explode.
I don't think it will.
It's not going to, I don't think.
There's like always microwaves.
I think it's just gonna catch fire, but it just sounds like it's gonna explode.
Go up closer and get video. Then you can show us all after.
That was crazy.
Listen to that.
Yeah, those are probably ultraviolet lights that are getting shot off in there. Was that 5? That wasn't 5 minutes already.
No. It's only been a minute 30.
I bet there's no more oxygen in there. It's all smoke. Bring a generator and an old microwave this time we go camping.
Yeah. At night too, it'd be like all like strobing.
Little light show.
So you can see it now where the smoke is starting to come up. That's it. It be toast.
That's
So
it.
I found that to be just an incredible illustration of what I was trying to get across in terms of what happens with the smart meters. What
Didn't
happens
do anything?
with
Oh,
if
there
this
it
is
goes.
another form of directed energy. That's what microwaves do. They actually, of course, they start from the inside.
See,
but
more
if you
metal
put,
shipping. Hey, the
certain
plastic's on
types
fire.
Of material into a microwave, we've all seen it spark, but I don't know how many of us have seen it quite this way. I mean, it's amazing to me that it does that. It actually can fuse things together. And
I just feel like it's gonna
other
explode.
things I took a look at
It's not going to, I don't think.
combustion synthesis,
I think
which
it's just gonna
is
catch fire, but
another really
it
interesting
just sounds
thing
like it's gonna
because
explode.
last night we were talking about a video where
Then you can show us all after.
they were saying, there's no way that substances will burn or whatever. You should have porcelain, for instance, and so this is actually from Red Pill Square. If you take a look at Red Pill Square, this is from last night, and this is lessons learned and ignored from a fire that destroyed 3,400 homes, 3,450. And so this is the one I was talking about, what will not burn in a fire. And so the woman in the video was referring to this particular website, so I thought I'd just bring it up. And so they go through and they say, this and that and the other thing, jewelry, silver coins, filing cabinets. Okay, so the most important part about this, though, is a house fire. Okay, so we took a look at some images there of fires. Those were not house fires. That's a forest fire. That is a and we've also took a look at the way that fire works without even having the houses there. We also took a look at the smart meter and how they spontaneously started on fire. Okay, so that reminds me a little bit of the microwave and how the kinds of reactions that it has. And then we take a look at the chemtrails. So it's not just one thing acting on its own. It's not like somebody standing there with a ray gun on the side of the forest that is shooting these. I've heard about orange lights and blue lights and all the rest of it. I don't doubt at all that there are lights of various colors and kinds, but that directed energy, it doesn't necessarily have to come from a space being like Marvin the Martian. And I think that's the problem, is that we get these ideas in our head, maybe because we have cartoons in our life, but we think that is what directed energy is, and that's how it looks. But we have to take all of these things and put them together. Now, I didn't realize that it was exactly a year ago. I posted this today on the website, and it was from last year, November 21st, 2017, and you can go take a look at it. I'm just going to open it up. This is really an interesting article. Sunspots and cell towers fueled the Northern California firestorm. Okay, these are the words that are used by the mainstream. It's not unusual to use the word firestorm, but I found this really interesting, in that they're talking about the fact that the trees aren't burned by the fire. They're dried out like a microwave. And I think if we hadn't seen, like we all have seen the microwave, but we sort of take it for granted. And I think just seeing that video and the destructive power of that directed energy, then seeing the fire and all of these things put together, we start to look at these images a little bit differently. At least I do. You start having a mind of your own. You start thinking critically, and I think that's so important. And the thing that anybody that wants to control you has going for them, is being able to get things in your head and have you not think, have me not think. And that's, think what you will of the church or anything else, but there are people within every organization in the world, and it's not God doing it. It's man trying to control other man, man, woman, whatever, trying to control one another. And one of the ways they do that is to have you repeat a narrative and to think in ways that are their group think. And this is exactly what's happening right now. If you even dare to think outside of what everybody else, the group is thinking, you're going to be ostracized. And if you dare to say, oh, Trump's doing something that you agree with, you're going to be ostracized. It's the most graphic illustration of it. And I've seen lots of different eras, but this is amazing to me, that because I feel it. I've never been afraid to speak out about things, and yet to me it's gotten to the point where I just go, I can't be bothered to go through the hassle of it. So here I am doing this show, and I guess it's a little bit safer to do it this way. But what I'm trying to do is to be allowed to have an opportunity to speak out amongst all of these kind of rhetorical videos where people are going, they'll have a bunch of people say, oh, I saw lasers, and I saw this technology, and I saw that technology, rather than going back and taking a look like I am now, which can be really boring for some people. And, this is not the channel for you if you're not interested in going through things methodically. If you're not wanting to exercise that part of your brain that can actually see an image like this and start to wonder about it and to think about it. Because I'm certainly not everyone's like me. I've always been kind of like this, even as a kid. And I realize that it's not everyone's thing. They want the sensationalized videos. They want to chime in with the latest conspiracy theory. Again, I'm called a conspiracy theorist, which I find really interesting. What I am is I'm a conspiracy realist. And I know that there's something going on. I don't know whether it's just that people are laying chemtrails and that they're putting smart meters in. That's enough for me. Because a conspiracy is where you have two or more people that are deciding. If you're planning a surprise party, you can call that a conspiracy because you're conspiring. You're not telling the birthday person or even their family maybe because you're trying to create a surprise. So we all know that there's conspiracies. We all know that governments do things in secret. We know that churches do things in secret. We know that families do things in secret. We do things in secret. How many of us have bought something and tried to hide it away, and we tell somebody else about it. But don't tell my mom or don't tell my husband. So this is what's happening. Like this is not, for whatever reason, it's not something that nature had intended. And whether it's that these houses are built so close together or that they're just wired, they're completely wired. And we saw what happened. Like that smart meter had wiring. If that fire starts there, it will actually travel. It can be conducted down the wires, not just the fire, but the actual energy that's created from the electricity. And it can travel down wires. And that is another form of directed energy. So I found this interesting because they say it's like a microwave. And so they point out a lot of these things. What caused the trees to remain standing tall and green while the Kmart store in Santa Rosa burned on an island to the ground? Only a microwave could cause this damage. Okay, so again, it's interesting that people make these kinds of assumptions or they draw these conclusions. What I see is a vacant parking lot. It's not wired. I see a couple of lamp standards. There's obviously some underground wiring there. But I see a store that it's got wiring all the way through it. It's got electricity all the way through it. It's full of combustibles. So once it has a means of just like that firestorm, it finds whatever is combustible. You saw that. It looked for a bush in the middle. There's all these other bushes, but it was focusing on that one bush because that was what it found in its path, in its tornado path. So I'm not suggesting that this would be the same idea as the tornado, but fire looks for the easiest possible thing to burn. And I think people that were tuned in last night know about my fire. When I was 12 years old, I started my room on fire. And, not everything burned, but the nail polish remover that was sitting about 6 inches away from where the candle was, the fire went directly to that, and that thing exploded. And there were shards of glass all over. So that would be another example. It didn't go for, it went for the Rubik's Cube. It went for the plastic. It went for the neoprene that was in the pillow that my dad used to douse the fire. But not everything burned in that room. Some things were perfectly fine, even though one area was fully engulfed, like roaring, absolutely roaring with fire. So I didn't actually see the fire. I saw the effects of that fire. It's kind of like we don't see the wind, but we can see the effects of the wind. We can see the effects here of a firestorm that took place. and the firestorm could have taken place within the wiring. But what I'm observing here is just a lot of things that don't get covered by saying only a microwave could cause this damage. And I want us to observe this because this was a pretty mainstream article. It was written by a guy, I think it was an AP guy. But I found it really weird that they would make these declarative statements because how can we say that only a microwave? So when we see those kinds of words, they're meant to send us in a particular direction. And for me, because I'm a contrarian, I think, I look at it and I go, no, not only a microwave. It may be that a microwave did that. And so again, don't get me wrong. I'm not denying that it could have been a microwave. But when I see only, always, never, then those are trigger words for me because I say, I see other things here. So let's be creative. Let's put on our thinking caps and start seeing things a little bit differently. So they do call it a firestorm, and that's why we need to look at it in a different way to how the person who created that other video looks at it, because she's looking at it like it's a house fire. Yes, a house fire is a totally different thing. There's certain combustibles or certain things that burn. When you are in the middle of a firestorm, there is fire all around you. It's the rocket stove. It's a whole different thing. It's being fed by itself. It creates an actual ecosystem. And add to that possible, smart technology, quote unquote, that combusts spontaneously, or that can be triggered. Think about that too. There's ways in which that smart technology can be triggered, and that's the sinister side of it. We don't have to have blue beams from space. We don't have to have Marvin the Martian off to the side with his laser beam. It's much more insidious than that. And so if somebody wants to mark a person for a fire, or we worry about our privacy, but I've worried about fires all along. That was one of the things I opposed about smart meters. I thought, I don't want this thing on the side of my house. I mean, it's doing enough damage to our bodies as it is, and then there's the surveillance aspect. But I have a phone, so I have no illusions about privacy. But when you consider that they can read your hydrometer from the street, and they can read it from the main office, think about the technology that goes into that. That means that it can also be controlled. And so I have opposed smart anything in my home, particularly after interviewing Rosa Corey. And please do take a look at her interview if you get a chance. So here we go down the again, this is from last year. So they're finding all sorts of things about the weather and that sort of thing. But again, they focus on this article about, on the idea, this one that's number 2 here that's marked Hilton, the fact that there are trees and that there's this structure that's burned down. There's trees around. This has been happening for many, many years. People have been wondering about this. And again, they're not thinking sometimes in ways that need to be thought about. Okay, so it says trees remain standing, shell of car microwaved. Okay, again, they use words, and I want you to really hear the kinds of language that are being used here. That car was not microwaved, because the closest thing we have to knowing what a microwave car looks like is a toasted car, and that's Dr. Judy Wood, and that her investigation from 911. I don't see any comparison here I don't even know if people have seen that car that you've seen. You're probably smarter than 99% of the people in the world, because most people don't even know about that police car or any of the cars from 9/11, because they were towed away and they suppressed that information. And so if I saw here with number one, if I saw an actual toasted, and I'm going to call that a microwaved car, because the technology that was used on 9/11 is very, very similar to the one that is used with the microwave. The fires start from the inside out, and I don't want to get graphic, but there were people, because people are made out of water, that had very horrific things happen to them on 9/11 and to their body parts. Again, I don't want to get into it too much, and one of the things that I don't want to be sensational, but it's important to recognize what a microwave does as compared to what another type of technology does. This vehicle, this thing that says it's the shell of a car is microwave, just as though it's it's all been settled. The science is settled. We don't need to have a discussion about it anymore. I can see where the tires are still there and they have burned in the fire. Vehicles have combustibles in them, not the least of which is gasoline. They're filled with gas. And I'll bet if somebody took a look at that and they had the expertise they needed to be able to do an investigation, they would see that, that probably around the engine on the back, there's probably more burning that went on, because the VWs have the engines in the back, and as far as I know. But, you can look at it forensically. You can see the ash around it. You can see where the paint is peeling. That does not in any way look like the police car that we were looking at with that delineation. There's certain characteristics, and one of them is that the rust sets in right away. Even though, you can have paint that's still visible, you can have plastic that's still there on the vehicle. So in other words, the tail lights or any of the plastic bits will not be affected by microwave energy. Just as if you put certain types of plastic in the microwave, they won't be affected. You put metal in the microwave and you saw what happens. It starts a huge fire. There's certain things that conduct. And so what are we seeing in the chemtrails? Aluminum, strontium, barium, and other things as well. But aluminum conducts electricity. If you put aluminum foil into the microwave, it will create havoc. Okay? If you put plastic into the microwave, it won't be affected. If you put paper into the microwave, it won't be affected. But the egg that you have on top of the paper, the potato or whatever it is, you put a paper towel in there, you put a potato, and then you cover it with another paper towel. The paper towel does not burn, but the potato cooks. Okay, so that is the best illustration. That is not what happened to this vehicle. All right, so again, this is how we're taught. We're taught to think in ways that dumb us down and make it so that we don't have to think anymore. We just go, oh, now my vocabulary is that vehicle was microwaved. However, we don't dismiss the entire article because of that, because there's some things we can glean from this article, because they did some of the research for me that I can't necessarily do myself. So I go and I take a look at what other people have done. Cell towers generate microwaves. In crowd solving the firestorm, which I love, I think that's what we're doing here. We're crowd solving. I love hearing your ideas. And I love it when I hope that you bring people over and continue the discussion, because I hope that there are places still that we can have a decent discussion without having people chiming in or if they want to troll, that's fine. But where we can actually use our intellect and use our spidey senses and everything else that we know, and then share our knowledge. I have knowledge that I've gained from other people because I have access to people through the work that I do. You guys have specific knowledge. Dr. Wood has amazing knowledge as an engineer and also as she looks at images forensically. Imagologist. I can't remember what it's called, but it's, we all have our specialties, so that's what crowd solving is all about. So we're crowd solving the firestorm. So a few journalists, scientists, and the author believe that the 4G network of cell towers created an electromagnetic field that allowed the solar flares to cook the houses directly without running through the power lines or smart meters. In total, 77 cell towers burned up or were damaged. They were not the source that lit the fires, but the feeders. I thought that was a really, really important idea. So, and even then, it could be partially, he says they don't have to run through the power lines or the smart meters. Well, they don't have to, but they may have, and those can be conductors. Those can be the things that direct the energy to a specific area. So I thought that was really helpful, to have. So again, when you're looking at articles, don't just go through and dismiss the whole thing or adopt the whole thing, but see what rings true and do your research as much as you can. So the current cell tower system in use is called WiMAX. Okay, so these are interesting things. But the network does not emit non-ionizing radiation, which the industry qualifies as typically safe. It causes some heating effect, but usually not enough to cause any type of long-term damage to tissue. Radio frequency energy, visible light, and microwave radiation are considered non-ionizing. And I'm an esthetician, so I used to use a galvanic machine, and so I did a little bit of of study on the chemical responses with ionization, and so I only know a little tiny bit about it, but it's really good to know these things. It's also is really interesting. If you put tinfoil in a microwave oven, it will spark with flames shooting up about. So you got a chance to see that, giving off an orange halo glow. It's not the metal that catches fire, but the aluminum oxide coating. When superheated by microwave energy, the coating releases oxygen on the surface, engorging the material to burn even hotter. Okay? Important. And so this phenomenon is known as field-activated combustion synthesis, a big mouthful. And I am not a scientist, but I found it really interesting. So it's like a Duraflame log. The self-sustaining oxygen fuels the flames, as has been seen with the ceramic roof tiles and the metals used to build, materials that do not burn in a normal forest fire. Okay? I'm not going to read the whole thing. I just want, this is such a good article to put together with some of the visuals that I've shown you. So I'm just going to go back up here. You can read that if you want to. I'm going to go back over and you can take a look at something else. Okay, wildfires melt aluminum. And so just another little video here. Whoops. This is... So people say, I think one of the things that was said in the video that we looked at last night that was being narrated, we didn't watch a lot of it, but when I saw it, I heard the narrator say, that aluminum doesn't melt. And that was one of the things on that site that she sent people to, what burns in a house fire. So again, it's like saying this was microwaved, or this doesn't happen, or that does happen, or, we need to have an open mind, and we need to suspend our disbelief and to understand that, clearly aluminum does burn because we saw it burned in the fire. And so this is a piece of aluminum that has burned. And again, this was from October 2017. So it's a year old, and we know that. So it's not that hard to do our research, folks. Let me just take a look here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over and I'm going to show you one more. I'm not going to make this too much longer, but I do want to show you a couple of other things that I noticed, because out of that discussion came the idea of combustion synthesis. And I found that really interesting, because it's like I wanted to show myself what that looks like. What is combustion synthesis? And so I took a look, being my curious self. I took a look to see what that actually was, and so I just wanted to show you what I found. And let's just take a look, see if we can get this video. Any of you that know your tables. And it's really important. It isn't the only answer. There's all sorts of different ways of looking at things. So I'm hoping that these discussions, I'm not really discussing, because you guys are not necessarily talking, but I love to hear what you have to say, and I love to get your response. And I think the more that we know about the world that is around us, and the less duped we are, and the less sucked in we are by any agenda. Because I have to say that there's an agenda on every side, and it's not just both, it's many, many sides. We have this thing as human beings where we want people to agree with us. We want them to buy into what we're saying, and it's almost like, that was my sense with Michael Jackson. People like Michael Jackson who surround themselves with yes people that are constantly saying yes to them, and it's often their demise, because nobody will tell him the truth. He was suffering and he wanted to be medicated. I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know the person, but I'm just saying that if we surround ourselves with people that are agreeing with us, we don't learn. We don't, I actually really enjoy having people challenge me. And I have to say, just anecdotally, I have a really good friend who is a DJ who had a show at the same radio station as I do. I do a terrestrial radio show, but I do it out of the Airstream. And he came in when I had moved the Airstream, and I had it configured in a way that was more or less to accommodate moving it. And he came in and he said, "Oh, I feel so claustrophobic in here," And my first response, and I've said this to him too, and I didn't say it at the time, but my first response was to go, "Well, screw you. I'm letting you use my space. What more do you want? Why, that's pretty rude." And, I didn't like the fact that he was criticizing my space. And then my second thought was to go, okay, so how can I make the space better? How can I make it more user-friendly, not necessarily for other people that are going to come into the space, even though that I do like to share. But it was just, I guess, for my own benefit to be able to see things through somebody else's eyes. So I thought about it, and then it was weird because I couldn't even sleep that night because I just went, I need to go out there and I need to make it more user-friendly. It was weird because the first thing was just to be so shut down and kind of like, okay, fine, you can't come into my studio. And it was really great the next day when I had rearranged things and I said, hey, come on over. I think you might like it. You might like the space a little bit better. And, he was really impressed with the idea that I took it to heart because he was so used to having people resist, right? And then it got really great because I thought, what I really need is a different desk. And I think what I was doing is I was being a little bit defensive because, frankly, I don't, I've gone through a lot and I just didn't have the money to be able to have the desk that I wanted. I wanted a credenza, and I don't know if any of you know what that is, but at the radio station we have a desk that's kind of a U shape, so you can swing around. Sorry, I just banged the microphone. Sorry about your eardrums there. And so, you can kind of swing around, but the cool thing is you can have your guests sitting on the other side of the table. And, it doesn't really matter. I don't need to go into too much detail, but I think you get the idea. The desk would have made all the difference. And it was really interesting because I looked on a bulletin board online in the community I'm in. And as soon as I said, what I need is that desk, there was a desk. It was free. I had to go pick it up, and they actually took it apart for me, and I just had to put it together. And then the other one was, I don't even know if I can move the furniture around in there. It was like playing chess. I had to move one piece before I could move the other piece, and it was a huge hassle. But the next day, like I was thinking in my head, oh, this is how I'll do it, and I had no idea if I could even lift the pieces of the desk. But I did this whole thing, and now I have this desk. And it was all because of this friend of mine, fellow radio host, who had said, he'd spoken the truth. He just said, this makes me feel claustrophobic. And now when people come in, they go, oh, that's so nice. It's such a great layout. And so I'm just saying that in every area of our life, like this is actually an opportunity for us not only to learn something and to expand our understanding and our knowledge, and but then also to be a bit more humble when we're presenting it to other people. We don't say things like, "This was microwaved," "This was this was done this way," "That was fried that way," "This is space beams." And again, that's another thing that I have learned by working with Dr. Judy Wood on these programs, because there's been many, many times when I've felt incredibly challenged by what she said. And I have to say, I gave a friend of mine an opportunity to have a private conversation with her, and I thought, oh, this is going to be really great, because I knew that my friend was very opinionated, and I'd learned a lot from him, but I thought maybe he could learn something too. And because she wouldn't go any further, he said, well, we know that this and that happened, right? He was talking about what he knew. And she said, so how do you know that? And can you, what makes you think that? And she wouldn't move on to the next concept until he had kind of answered that question. And it's like, I don't have to answer that question. No, you don't. That's the great thing. We have free will. You don't have to answer it, but you might actually learn something, or you might learn how to learn. So again, know what you know, and don't speculate on other things. Know what it is that you know that you know. And whatever you don't know, put it to the side or write it down and say, yeah, I'm not really sure what's happening there, but it doesn't seem quite right. Doesn't, even if it's a feeling that you have, because sometimes, again, sorry, I when I called Dr. Ole Johansson, it was because they were installing smart meters in my neighborhood, and I had guests on the show, and what they would do is they go, well, these EMFs, and I said, well, do you even know what an EMF is? Electromagnetic frequency. And, oh, I know. Well, it's from, cell towers, and it's because of cell phones, and it's because of smart meters and wireless internet, and that's true. But it's also because of hair dryers, and it's also because of walkie-talkies and remote controls, and those phones that you carry around, they're radio frequency phones, and they're working on the gigahertz level, so I just found it interesting, because when I started to talk about it in that way, people started to shut down and going, well, we can't, it's not like we can immunize ourselves from all of this. No, but it's really good that we know. It's really good that we know what it is that we know, and that we're not afraid to explore that and to say, I might have to actually get rid of my remote control if I truly am affected by electromagnetic frequencies. It's not just the smartphones or the Wi-Fi. It's baby monitors. There's a baby monitor beside my baby's head, and I might not have the convenience of having that technology in my child's room if I decide that electromagnetic frequencies are not for me. I may not be able to have a wireless phone. I may not be able to have some of the conveniences. And the way that we avoid having to make some of these tough choices is by saying, well, I don't really want to know. I don't really want to know about the science. So again, I'm presenting this information to you. I am presenting it. I'm not drawing any conclusions. I'm not, and that isn't to say that I'm afraid to draw a conclusion. I have definitely got my own ideas about this. But what I can do is I can look forensically at these images. I can look at these planes that are going overhead, like this one where they're intersecting. And I can say, I don't recall that being that way when I was growing up. And of course, you're going to have people wanting to have an argument. And I don't want to have an argument. I just want to say, are you interested in knowing some of the things that I've learned? And if they say no, then walk away. So this is going to be our challenge at Thanksgiving, at Christmas, at various times of the year when we have opportunities to get into these kind of discussions. And sometimes it's just a good idea to walk away from those. I mean, there's enough stuff as it is. I did a whole turkey dinner, I think it was at Christmas one year, and my brother-in-law's new girlfriend, no, it was my sister-in-law's new boyfriend, sorry. My sister-in-law came to the dinner from out of town, and she said, oh, by the way, we're vegetarians. And I thought, I could have gone a couple of different ways with that, but I just thought, did we not invite you a month ago? Did we not mention that this is going to be a Christmas dinner, turkey dinner? And fortunately, I was able to sort of whip up something and figure it out. But I find, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's the fact that people are vegans or vegetarians or I do keto or whatever. you know, it seems like we expect other people to accommodate to us, even though we haven't really communicated very well. So I say a lot of this has to do with the way that we communicate and not what it is that we communicate. And so, because I don't really mind if they're vegetarians or not, but sometimes people set you up. This was actually in the 80s. So it was almost like a setup. They're waiting for somebody to go, you know, oh, you vegetarians. Well, I don't care if you're a vegetarian. I think it's absolutely fine. It has nothing to do with that. It is really to do with the fact that you didn't have the courtesy to get in touch with me a month ago or when I first invited you, so that I wasn't embarrassed because I didn't prepare a meal for you. Or you know, maybe you could have brought something to add. I don't know, but I'm just saying it's people will mistake your response for a judgment about what they're doing, or you know what they just said, when it's actually a frustration about the lack of courtesy. And I think we have to show courtesy to other people in order to have the opportunity to be heard. So if you like what you're hearing, I hope you'll subscribe, bring people over. And I'm really trying to get my fifth wheel, which is what I'm going to be living in. Right now it's getting a little bit cold, so I'm doing a lot of studio time. But some people may not know, I lost everything last year, and I am rebuilding things, but I've decided that I'm going to go with a fifth wheel because I've also got the Airstream. So I have my old 89 F250, which I love, bucked the truck, and I've got a hitch that I tow the Airstream with. And then I have a fifth wheel hitch that I tow this little fifth wheel with. And I'm going to be getting a larger one that is like a tiny house. It's old. It's from the 90s, but it needs renovating. But it's actually got a bathroom, and it's got a bedroom, and it's got a kitchen. And I'm hoping to be able to have my kids over, and my friends and all the people that have been putting up with my nonsense, and to be able to entertain. So that's the project that I'm working on. So anything that is donated through the Streamlabs link that you'll see in the description is going to go directly to that. And I'm hoping to be able to pick it up before Christmas, because that's my Christmas present to me and to all of my friends and family. And the ongoing project is the Airstream Studio, which it's a 1969 Airstream. As I've mentioned, it's a vintage, and for any of you that appreciate Airstreams, even $1 is much appreciated, because I have to do a lot of the riveting. I've done most of the inside, but I'm just trying to get it all back to its original glory. It's missing a window. Don't ask me why. But I'm actually upgrading it. I'm also trying to make sure that I have, there's a type of heater that you can mount on a wall, and it just keeps the heat at a constant sort of temperature without breaking the bank. So that's another thing that I'm looking at. So that's basically the whole ball of wax tonight, and I hope that as you carry on with your evening, or I don't know, depending on where you are in the world, it could be very, very early morning. We do have people that watch the video from various areas. I know Dr. Judy had lots of fans in Europe, and I hope to have her back on the show sometime. But this is a subject that I think she's found a little bit tedious, because she's gotten so much criticism for not just jumping in with both feet and saying, oh yes, that was a DEW weapon for sure. But anyway, let's understand what a directed energy weapon is, which is what DEW stands for, and understand what nature does, and what we've done to weaponize some of the natural phenomenon. And as this article says, sunspots interact with smart meter technology. And so there's a variety of different reasons why we're experiencing these firestorms. This ain't a house fire, folks. So to compare it to a house fire is doing an injustice. Okay, so I'm going to say goodbye. I really enjoy doing these, I guess, investigations, for lack of a better word. And I am gonna continue on with this, but I'm also, I'm going to be having other guests on the show as well, so you don't have to listen to me droning on. But I do hope that you will, chime in, let me know what you think, comment below, like, share, and do all that great stuff. Okay, we will talk to you soon.